Hello and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I want to talk to you here about security vulnerabilities. There was a serious high-risk security vulnerability in the Avira antivirus program, and I still recommend Avira and Kaspersky. I'm still someone who says that antivirus protection can make sense, and I'm not going to demonize it now either. These security vulnerabilities have occurred more frequently in the past. With Norton and also with Kaspersky, actually with every antivirus program, to be honest. Avira does a very good job. They are a really good antivirus, and I also recommend it for people working from home and small businesses. So let's get to the vulnerability itself. This allows the attacker to execute malicious code. That's just how it is. With security vulnerabilities, I would say, according to information technology researchers, this was about 3 highly critical security vulnerabilities that allowed these sophisticated hackers to place links, inject harmful malware, create malicious content, and generally gain full access to the entire system. Avira has not yet released a fix for these security vulnerabilities at this current moment, but they usually provide a response in a relatively short time frame, and will address the issue with a patch very soon. Yes, there's no need to panic because of this. As I said, these kinds of vulnerabilities exist in all programs, including Windows Defender, and they are fixed less frequently, but I'll say more about that later. The vulnerabilities affect Avira versions up to and including such and such, so probably all Avira versions are affected, including Avira Prime and the free version. And they were not only present in the antivirus itself, but also in this optimizer, which, how should I put it, cleans and optimizes the PC. I don't really find that very useful from Avira, even though otherwise I think it's a very good antivirus, yes. These optimizers are supposed to help you clean the registry or delete your browser history. But it has happened to me that a lot of things in my browser history were deleted that I actually wanted to keep. That's why I always do it manually. But that's just an aside. Back to the topic. Yes, so Avira is a very good antivirus provider, and the same kind of security vulnerability has happened before with Avira, as well as with AVG and several other antivirus providers. And it will keep happening again and again. And that's especially critical, of course, because antivirus is, so to speak, the bodyguard for your PC. You could also call it the digital guardian. And in this case, it just doesn't create a good impression on the manufacturers, on the antivirus industry, in this case Avira, because these are critical security vulnerabilities, and according to Heise Online, a German computer magazine, they are even considered highly risky security vulnerabilities. Of course, that makes for a better headline, obviously. But the fact is, these security vulnerabilities also exist in Windows Defender, again and again, not just once. For anyone who says Windows Defender is perfect and only recommends it, I have to disagree. Just 3 or 4 months ago, Windows Defender had a serious critical flaw where you could bypass the protection with just a comma. I even talked to an information technology specialist about it who said, yeah, I'm not really sure. What are your thoughts on the matter? Windows Defender is actually exceptionally reliable and effective. It's sufficient, but in the end, it really depends on the specific target audience. Yes, it definitely depends on the target audience. That's my opinion. And let me put it this way. If I have an acquaintance who is over 70, who isn't very computer savvy, who downloads all the programs, who spends a lot of time on the internet, does a lot of things on the internet, and as I said, isn't very tech savvy, then I would recommend their protection to him. Because someone who spends a lot of time on the dark web or visits dubious websites, some with illegal content maybe, I'll just say, as an example, yes, porn sites, but also streaming sites that are not officially allowed. And as I said, the dark web via the Tor browser. In my opinion, protection is definitely a must in such cases. If someone only watches YouTube videos or, like me at the moment, isn't on their laptop much and just visits their own blog, then it's totally unnecessary. Of course, you don't need any kind of protection in that case. I still wouldn't turn off Windows Defender neither for personal use nor for businesses, because then you're really relying entirely on your own common sense and your brain, which in principle isn't bad and is actually very sensible. One of the best foundations, so to speak. But I still wouldn't do it because for me personally, it's just far too suspicious and way too risky to say, I'm going to turn off Windows Defender completely. Except, of course, if I use the laptop offline just for gaming, that would work. But even then, I actually don't really like to do that. So it's definitely sensible. Microsoft Defender has really improved here, and over the years has developed a very good antivirus protection. And they've now also responded to the latest 0-day vulnerability with a critical security update, delivering a patch for it. And Windows Defender, Microsoft Defender, is now fully updated here. It did not seem to be such a significant or dangerous vulnerability. I'd have to look it up right now. But they always force you to take action, whether it's major security gaps or minor ones. Of course, hackers can exploit these flaws to inject malicious code or even disable Windows Defender entirely. They can also secretly monitor a wide range of sensitive activities, for example. Unfortunately, Microsoft hasn't been performing very well in this specific area lately. At least according to the German test, there was a lot of criticism that the protection works very poorly against phishing sites, that the protection doesn't work at all offline, and that Microsoft Defender is very user-unfriendly, if I may put it that way. I can confirm that as well because it's really more geared towards power users. And that means I'm not really part of the target group you can discuss this with. They say, I don't need Windows Defender, or Windows Defender is enough, depending on the person. Yeah, of course, power users, usually IT teachers with a background in the field. People who can do everything, who use the perfect browser, the safest browser, who can also harden this browser, who really know how to secure Windows Defender properly. And yes, of course, they don't need any extra protection, that's obvious. And so it's only logical that they call it snake oil. But from my point of view, it's not snake oil. It's absolutely useful for small businesses and also for medium-sized companies to use additional protection. And it's also absolutely reasonable for certain target groups working from home to not dismiss antivirus protection. Exactly. That's all there is to say about that. And of course, this mainly concerns in these articles that are in German, but what we've been talking about now is actually mostly antivirus software that's affected by this. But it's also true that the more programs you download onto your computer, the more potential risks there are and the more vulnerabilities exist. A good example, of course, is Microsoft Office. There have also been repeated incidents with it in the past. It has had serious security vulnerabilities. But this can also happen with Chimp and Blender, and with dozens of other programs, which then also receive a patch, a security update. So, of course, I try to work online in the cloud as much as possible, but that's obviously not a perfect solution either. And my recommendation here is really to use just a handful of programs that you truly need, that you work with regularly, and of course to keep them updated. By the way, Avira offers a software updater in the free version, which automatically updates these programs, but there are also other providers who offer this as an additional tool. Then there was another security vulnerability, and these exist in every other browser as well. Time and again in Google Chrome, just as in Firefox. A single click became a danger. What was it about? It was primarily about hackers being able to exploit this browser to inject malware. And most of the time, Chrome itself isn't even the problem, but rather the third-party providers, meaning the Chrome add-ons in the web store, which can lead to serious security vulnerabilities. They can request all sorts of data from you, which in my view is also very bad for privacy. And there certainly are such apps for that. Or, how should I put it, add-ons in the web store that aren't so good. Google would love to kick those out too, but a lot of things just slip through their fingers. It's the same with the Play Store. They simply can't check every app 100% of the time. And you don't need to have hundreds of thousands of add-ons active here, because the problem is, of course, the more add-ons you have, the slower Chrome or even Firefox becomes. I've especially noticed this with Firefox. There are a lot of SEO add-ons installed here. The more of them you install, the slower the browser gets. And yes, they aren't a major threat, at least not to your privacy. But of course, security vulnerabilities can still certainly exist. In this case, though, I believe it actually concerns Chrome itself. Let me just double check here. There was definitely an emergency update for their own browser, and it was released relatively quickly. The vulnerability in question was a so-called use after free error, specifically in the CSS processing in Chrome's own code. This had nothing to do with the add-ons. That was already in January, or maybe even December. A very current topic is that all these add-ons often collect too much private data, too much information. This isn't fundamentally about security vulnerabilities, though that's something you should also be aware of, but in this case it was actually about Chrome itself. And this vulnerability was fixed promptly. So, on the 13th On February 13th, Google already addressed this on their blog and closed this security gap quickly. It's also important to know that other browsers are affected as well, those based on Chromium such as Brave, Vivaldi, Opera, and Edge. Exactly. And Firefox and Waterfox, they have their own engine. It's called Gecko, I believe. They were not affected, but all Chromium-based browsers are also updated promptly, usually on a cycle of about 2 weeks. So how quickly they're updated is actually pretty fast, and Brave as well. And you really can't go wrong with it. These are very good browsers that I can definitely recommend. And anyone who goes online or uses the internet needs to be aware that the internet is a gateway to the world, but of course it can also open the door or gateway for hackers. Yes, exactly. Then theoretically, you shouldn't go online anymore because, as I said, these security vulnerabilities keep appearing in browsers, antivirus software, but also in regular computer programs. And the most important thing is how you deal with them. Whether you are an individual user or a business entity, these security vulnerabilities are fixed and resolved promptly. How does the press respond to this? And so on. That's what you really need to know about these security vulnerabilities. And there's absolutely no need to worry about it. And also, from my point of view, there's no need to panic because almost every week or at least every month you read that Chrome has fixed a serious security vulnerability. There was a serious security vulnerability in an antivirus program. Windows Defender isn't as secure after all, and so on. It's always the same headlines over and over again. And yes, now you know that there can always be a security vulnerability, which is then promptly fixed by the manufacturers. And that's why I'm not saying that antivirus software is bad, nor am I saying I don't recommend it. I still do. I'm also not saying that browsers are fundamentally bad just because there are several security vulnerabilities, for example, with Opera. I was, of course, a bit critical that Opera was, let's say, a bit sloppy in dealing with the security vulnerabilities, only patching them every 3 weeks last year or the year before. And they always seem to be the last browser to fix those security vulnerabilities. Or like with Aldi, who dug several pits because they only jumped over them. But at the end of the day, they are still very good, secure browsers that you can use. Google has a very good sandboxing model, and Microsoft Edge is also secure, and you absolutely can't go wrong with it. Yes, that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video.